Saddam Hussein promised glory, but instead ruled Iraq with fear and brutal force. When he finally fell, the world didn't just want him removed. His execution wasn't just a legal decision. It was a message designed to be seen by millions. And how it happened was even darker and personal than most people ever realized. Saddam Hussein was born on April 28, 1937, in the small village of Al-Auja near Tikrit. The Iraq he was born into was not stable at all. Governments were changing fast, leaders were being overthrown, and different groups were fighting for power. There were constant arguments inside the army and political circles. As a child, Saddam saw a country where violence and fear were normal parts of daily life. This environment shaped the way he looked at power and control. He left his village while he was still young and moved to Baghdad hoping for a better future. But the capital was also filled with tension. Political groups were rising, and many of them believed the only way to gain control was through force. Saddam was drawn to this world. By the late 1950s, he joined the Ba'ath Party, a group that talked about strong leadership, Arab pride, and creating a modern state. For Saddam, the Ba'ath Party was more than politics. It was a path to influence. He liked how the party operated in secret and how it valued loyalty above everything. The big turning point came in July 1968, when the Ba'ath Party carried out a successful coup and took control of Iraq. Saddam was still young, only in his early 30s, but he stood out. He knew how to build alliances, and he knew how to remove anyone who got between him and more power. Very quickly, he became vice president under Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr. Many officials noticed that Saddam was the real force guiding decisions. He handled security, intelligence, and internal threats, which gave him control over the country without officially being the leader. In July 1979, he made his final move. Al-Bakr stepped down, and Saddam became the president of Iraq. The moment he took office, he began reshaping the entire state to fit his vision. Iraq's military grew rapidly. Intelligence agencies multiplied. These agencies watched citizens, tracked enemies, and made sure no one could challenge him. Saddam filled important positions with people from his hometown and his own Tikriti clan because he trusted them the most. He wanted a government that answered only to him. By the early 1980s, Saddam had full control over Iraq. Every major decision went through him, whether it was about the economy, oil production, foreign policy, or security. He believed fear was a tool that kept people in line, and he used it constantly. His rise created a leadership style that depended on absolute power and total loyalty. But this rise also created pressure, enemies, and expectations. And soon, Saddam's hunger for strength would push him into a conflict that drained his country and weakened everything he built. In September 1980, he ordered Iraqi forces to invade Iran. He believed Iran was in chaos after the 1979 revolution that had overthrown the Shah. Iran's government was still settling in, and its military was recovering from purges. Saddam saw an opportunity. He wanted to control disputed border areas, especially around the Shatt al-Arab waterway, and he wanted Iraq to become the strongest country in the region. Saddam and his generals thought the war would end in a few weeks or months, but Iran resisted with everything it had. What started as a quick attack turned into an 8-year conflict that lasted from 1980 to 88. It became one of the longest conventional wars of the 20th century. Entire cities near the border were destroyed. Young men from both countries were sent to the front lines in massive numbers. By the end, more than 500,000 soldiers from both sides were killed, and many more were injured or went missing. Civilians also suffered from airstrikes, shortages, and displacement. Iraq spent enormous amounts of money trying to keep the war going. The country bought weapons, ammunition, vehicles, and supplies from around the world. The United States shared intelligence with Iraq because it did not want Iran's new revolutionary government gaining more power. The Soviet Union sold Iraq large quantities of weapons. France supplied aircraft and equipment. Several Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, loaned Iraq billions of dollars to help it continue fighting Iran. With all this support behind him, Saddam believed he was too important to fail. He felt these countries would back him no matter what. But as the years passed, the war drained Iraq's economy. Oil exports dropped, infrastructure crumbled, public services struggled. When the war finally ended in August 1988, Iraq was far weaker than when it began. The country's debt was massive. Kuwait alone was owed more than $10 billion. Saddam asked Kuwait to forgive the loans because he said Iraq had protected the region by fighting Iran. Kuwait refused. They wanted their money back because their own economy depended on it. That refusal pushed Saddam into anger and desperation. He saw it as a betrayal from a neighbor he thought should support him, and this tension began to grow into something far more dangerous. The Iran-Iraq war didn't just damage Iraq financially. It damaged Saddam's reputation inside the region and weakened the confidence people once had in him. This pressure, combined with the heavy debt, set the stage for his next major decision. On August 2, 1990, Iraq crossed into Kuwait before sunrise. The attack moved fast because Kuwait's army was small and not prepared for a sudden assault. Within a few hours, Iraqi troops reached Kuwait City. By the end of the day, Saddam's forces controlled the entire country. The invasion shocked governments around the world because Kuwait was wealthy, close to major oil routes, and had strong ties to the United States, the United Kingdom, and Saudi Arabia. Saddam publicly said Kuwait was lowering oil prices on purpose and drilling into Iraqi oil fields along the border. He claimed these actions were hurting Iraq's already damaged economy after the Iran-Iraq war. But most countries believed Saddam simply wanted Kuwait's wealth, oil fields, and coastline on the Persian Gulf. Many world leaders feared he might attack Saudi Arabia next, which would put even more global oil at risk. The international response was immediate. On the same day as the invasion, the United States Security Council condemned Iraq's actions. The United States began sending forces to Saudi Arabia within days. Soon, dozens of nations joined what became the largest military coalition since World War II. Countries like the United Kingdom, France, Egypt, Canada, and Australia all sent troops or support. By January 1991, the coalition had built up more than 600,000 troops in the region. On January 17, 1991, the coalition launched a massive air campaign known as Operation Desert Storm. For weeks, coalition aircraft targeted Iraqi command centers, communication lines, and military bases. The airstrikes destroyed much of Iraq's equipment before the ground forces even moved in. When the ground assault began on February 24th, it lasted only 100 hours. The Iraqi army, which had been considered one of the strongest in the Middle East during the 1980s, could not withstand the pressure. Tens of thousands of Iraqi soldiers surrendered. Others fled toward Basra in long lines that were struck repeatedly from the air. By February 28th, Kuwait was fully liberated. Iraq's defeat led to strict United Nations sanctions. These sanctions blocked many imports and limited Iraq's oil sales through the Oil for Food program. Factories shut down, hospitals struggled, electricity was unreliable. The dinar collapsed in value. In many towns, basic items like powdered milk, soap, and antibiotics became luxury goods. The people paid the price, not the government. Inside Iraq, frustration grew. Uprisings broke out in the north and south in 1991, especially among Kurds and Shia communities. Saddam crushed these rebellions with brutal force, using elite units like the Republican Guard. His control remained, but the world now saw him as a leader who caused instability far beyond his own borders. This shift was important. For years, some Western governments had tolerated Saddam because he opposed Iran. But after Kuwait, that view changed. He was now seen as unpredictable, aggressive, and willing to start wars that could pull the whole region into chaos. And although he survived the 1990s, the invasion of Kuwait had already planted the seed for his final defeat. On March 20th, 2003, The United States and the United Kingdom began their invasion of Iraq. The operation started with airstrikes on Baghdad, aimed at what American intelligence believed were locations linked to Saddam and his top commanders. President George W. Bush and Prime Minister Tony Blair argued that Iraq held weapons of mass destruction and posed a threat. Other countries joined the invasion as well, including Australia and Poland. Even though no weapons were found later, the attack continued at full speed. Coalition ground forces moved into southern Iraq from Kuwait and advanced toward Baghdad. Cities like Basra, Najaf, and Karbala saw heavy fighting. Iraqi units tried to defend, but years of sanctions, lack of training, and poor equipment left them too weak to hold back a modern military force. By April, the coalition troops were already on the outskirts of Baghdad. On April 9, 2003, American forces entered central Baghdad. The Iraqi government simply collapsed. Offices were abandoned. Commanders disappeared. The capital fell faster than many expected. Crowds gathered in Firdos Square as a large statue of Saddam was pulled down, showing symbolically that his rule was finished. But Saddam himself was nowhere to be seen. For months he stayed hidden. He moved between safe houses around Tikrit, Samarra, and the villages along the Tigris River. U.S. forces searched for him under Operation Red Dawn, a mission designed to track him through old contacts, family ties, and tribal networks. Dozens of raids were carried out. Slowly, intelligence gathered clues, especially from people loyal to him who were arrested and questioned. The breakthrough came on December 13, 2003, near the town of Ad-Dawr, just south of Tikrit. Soldiers from the 4th Infantry Division and Special Operations units found Saddam hiding in a small underground hole on a farm. The hideout was narrow, cramped, and covered with dirt and debris. Inside were some clothes, a pistol, and a few $1,000s. On June 2004, he was handed over to the Iraqi interim government after months in American custody. This handover meant Iraq itself would judge him. He faced several major charges. These included crimes against humanity, running torture centers, and ordering mass killings. There were many possible cases to choose from, but prosecutors focused on one that was the most straightforward: the Dujail case. The Dujail story went back to 1982. Saddam had visited the Shia town after Iran invaded Iraq. During the visit, gunmen linked to the Dawa party tried to assassinate him. Saddam survived, but his response was brutal. Security forces arrested around 148 men and boys, many as young as teenagers. They were tortured, executed, or disappeared. Homes were bulldozed, farmland was destroyed, families were scattered. Because so many documents survived, including official orders and lists of the detainees, this case was easier to prove than larger events like the Anfal campaign. The trial started on October 19, 2005. It was messy from the beginning. One judge resigned out of fear. Another was removed. 3 defense lawyers were targeted, and at least 2 were murdered by insurgents who saw the trial as a threat or a symbol. Saddam tried to delay things by shouting, arguing, and refusing to recognize the court. Even so, the testimony continued. Survivors described arrests, torture, and executions. Papers from Saddam's own intelligence agencies showed signatures, dates, and orders that tied directly back to him. On November 5, 2006, after months of hearings, the court announced its ruling. Saddam was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. But what happened next was unusual. In late 2006, Iraq was breaking apart. Every week brought new bombings. Shia and Sunni militias fought openly in the streets. Thousands were dying every month. Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's government was weak, new, and struggling to gain trust. To many Shia families, Saddam wasn't just a dictator. He was the man tied to torture chambers in Basra, the mass graves in the south, and the executions of Shia clerics. For them, watching him face justice felt like the closing of a long and painful chapter. But the government wanted to show strength. They needed to prove they were the ones making decisions in the new Iraq, not the Americans. A filmed execution could help them do that. It would show that Saddam was truly defeated and that the era of fear had ended. The United States had its own goals. They wanted the world to see a clear ending to Saddam's rule. U.S. commanders worried that if Saddam died quietly or out of view, insurgents might turn him into a symbol. A recorded execution made that less likely. This combination of revenge, politics, and messaging pushed everyone toward the idea of a public hanging. Saddam's appeal process ended on December 26, 2006. According to Iraqi law, an execution had to take place within 30 days after the final verdict. But officials did not wait long. They picked December 30th, 2006, just 4 days later. This date was important. It fell during Eid al-Adha, one of the biggest holidays in Islam. For Sunnis, it was the first day of Eid. For Shias, it was the second. Carrying out the execution during a sacred holiday was a strong testament. It showed the government was unwilling to delay even for religious tradition. It was another way to show they were fully in control. At that time, Saddam was still held by American forces because they feared an attack if he were moved too early. But on the morning of December 30th at around 6 a.m., the United States handed him over to the Iraqi guards. This happened at Camp Victory, a large U.S. base near Baghdad International Airport. Once the handover was complete, the countdown was over. The final steps toward the execution had officially begun. The official reason for recording the execution was that the Iraqi government wanted a clear legal record. They said it was for documentation, so nobody could argue later about what happened. But there was also another reason that everyone understood, even if it was not written in any report. They wanted people to see the end of a man who ruled Iraq through fear, prisons, and violence for more than 2 decades. When Saddam was brought to the execution room, several Iraqi officials came prepared with their own devices. Some carried small cameras that could fit in one hand. Others had early model mobile phones that could record short videos. One of the guards held his phone low and filmed secretly. The government had not planned for a broadcast, but they did allow cameras inside because they knew the footage might be needed later. Their goal was simple. For years, rumors had surrounded Saddam. Even after his capture in 2003, many Iraqis believed he might escape or that the Americans would protect him. The government wanted to end all that talk. A recorded execution meant no one could say he survived or was replaced by a body double. It was proof that the trial had reached its final step. Early in the morning, Saddam was led into the chamber. The guards confirmed his identity. They checked the rope. They read out the legal orders. At exactly 6:06 a.m., the sentence was carried out. Within hours, the footage reached television screens, websites, and mobile phones across the world. Millions saw it. The video ended the speculation, but it also opened a new chapter filled with anger, debate, and shock. Many Iraqis still believed he had power. They remembered how he survived wars, rebellions, and assassination attempts. Some thought he might return the same way he had returned from previous crises. In a country full of rumors and fear, anything seemed possible. But the public execution removed the mystery. It showed clearly that Saddam was no longer part of Iraq's future. It also sent a signal to insurgent groups that the old regime was not coming back. The new authorities believed that the only way to erase decades of fear was to end him in a way that everyone could see and understand. They wanted to show he had no power left, not even in his final moments. Many hoped that Saddam's death would calm Iraq, but the opposite happened. In 2007, the violence grew even worse. Different groups used the execution for their own political gains. Some Shia militias celebrated it. Some Sunni groups used it to recruit more fighters. Bombings, kidnappings, and street battles increased almost everywhere. The United States responded by sending around 30,000 extra soldiers in what became known as the Surge. Saddam was buried the next day, on December 31, 2006, in his hometown of Al-Auja. His family was allowed to attend, but under heavy security. In the years that followed, supporters continued to visit his grave, showing that his influence had not disappeared completely, even though he was gone. What no one predicted was how fast the video would move. It spread across news channels, websites, and personal phones in almost every country. Even today, it remains one of the most watched political execution videos ever recorded. It changed how people remembered Saddam and how they viewed the Iraq War, and it became a reminder that even the end of a dictator can reshape a region for years to come.